Hey, this is going to be part 7 in my StarCraft 2 history series. And part 6, for those who need a small recap, is it was about Puma's World Tour. It spans from 2011 to the early parts of 2012. And it talks about Puma's career as like a world warrior, so to speak, because that was in international tournaments, that was when he was his best. And like a majority of the foreigner tournaments were in a way about Puma or about stopping Puma or defeating Puma, and he's one of those players who had enormous success out in the international circuit but had none in GSL. So because of that, because he's one of the big players in 2011, even though he's not really well remembered now, he had his own video. And in this one, I'm going to talk. This one spans only across 2 tournaments, but 2 incredibly important tournaments in the history of StarCraft 2. It's MLG Anaheim 2011, and it is GSL August. And MLG 2011 Anaheim is the culmination of a bunch of the story arcs I've been trying to explain in each part of history. So first, obviously, you have all the foreigners showing up. So Huck is here, Naniwa is here, Idra is here, Thorzane is here, um, Rhett is here, Kiwikaki from the early days is here. White Raw is here. There's a bunch of players are here. Even Morrow, like right there, all the forwards have come. Many of them are the best. And then there is Donggu. He finally makes his debut into the international scene. And there's this funny state of the game podcast from the early days of StarCraft 2 2011, and one of the hosts panelists, I guess, was Noni, who is one of the best foreigner Brood War players who played Protoss, but his skills didn't necessarily translate that well into StarCraft 2. But he had this. They were previewing this this MLG Anaheim, and the invites hadn't come out yet, and like they were talking about the potential like Koreans they can invite over to the MLG Anaheim. He's like, yeah, that's fine, like because Noni himself is like a competitive player. He wants to play against the best players, but so he's like, yeah, MVP is fine, yeah, MMA is fine. But then you get into like Donggu, he's like, no, keep that fucking monster away from me, because Donggu was such a beast, even though he wasn't in GSL yet. Like he was in people's minds easily the second best Zerg in the world, and arguably the best Zerg. He just the there were so many strong middle tier players back then in 2011, and the GSL Code S, Code A promotion system was kind of fucked up, so it was very hard to get into there. And so Dongegu, even though he did well in GSTL, even though people, if you looked at the game, you knew he was as good as or better than any Zerg player in the world, he had yet to show it because of the way the system worked. And on top of that, Dongyu wanted to go to this MLG because this MLG had an extra prize for everybody. Whoever got the highest placing that wasn't already in GSL got a GSL seed. And so everybody's going to show up for this one. Everybody was interested. And MVP even shows up for this one, even though MVP already has GSL seed. And the biggest name value actually comes from Slayers, because all their players show up, and MMA shows up, Boxer shows up, Gonzi shows up, and this is one of actually I think did Ryung didn't show up, but Rain did show up. Rain from TSL, basically a Terran player, and he actually plays an important role in all of this. But basically, this is like one of the only MLGs I remember where they had this extra content about Team Slayers as a team, because Boxer is a legendary player. So they wanted to get their views on him as a player from his teammates. And basically MMA and Gonzi and later Ryung all call themselves like the son of Boxer, so the sons of Boxer, so to speak, the sons of Slayers. And they all like proclaim like, yeah, I just want to be the best so that Boxer can acknowledge my greatness, basically. And MMA was Boxer's favorite son because MMA was the best player, but Gonzi and Ryung were like aiming to outdo MMA the entire time, or that's how they kind of presented it. And in terms of the meta, Slayers ends up like defining the TVZ meta at this tournament with the Blue Flame Hellions, and these Blue Flame Hellions are extraordinarily strong here because nobody had ever seen them. Basically, what they were was it was an upgrade on the factory tech lab, and what it does is it lets the Hellions do extra damage to light units, so you can two-shot drones. And so you can just imagine a medevac comes out, like four Blue Flame Hellions comes out, and then your drone line is dead because nobody had ever seen this before. Nobody had understood how to counter it, even with just micro. So it was an incredibly strong build, and it lost its power over time, but it becomes a critical component later on in a very specific mech build used by MVP in the throes of the worst era of StarCraft 2 history. So that's an important thing to take note of. And obviously there's Jinro was also here, so just look up the Wikipedia page. And another thing to note is there's all the foreigners have shown up, the Slayers have shown up, MVP has shown up, Donghagu has shown up. So you have MMA versus Donghagu, you have MMA versus MVP, you have Naniwa versus the World, you have Boxer's Legendary Return, you have all this crazy shit that was building up towards this one tournament. And there were even like a bunch of players I haven't mentioned that would become important. Alicia, the Protoss player, Choya, the FOU, later FXL coach. Oz makes one of his early debuts here. MC was here. July was here. Luciera was here. Moon was here. A bunch of great players were here. And there was something special about the MLGs. I thought about it as to what differentiated them. And in a way, their fucked up sort of tournament structure was what differentiated them, because obviously you had the open bracket, which kind of defines MLG. Like anybody can show up, anybody can play, and if you're good, you can get to the top in one go, right? And that's always incredibly exciting, especially because they ran a double elim. But the other part was because they also had pool play where players were seeded, the best ones were seeded over time, and obviously it's kind of fucked up in a sense because a bunch of like the whack players were seeded, like Cruncher, pretty famous one, and a few others. And so you could get grandfathered in even though you were a terrible player over time. But because they kept like injecting a bunch of good players into it with the pool play with four different pools, it made it so that there was always a good match to watch the entire time, because the early matches of the open bracket were all shitty, but you get like Huck versus Naniwal round one, or you get like Boxer versus Indra, MVP versus like Select was like surprisingly hyped, like NA Korean player who was living in NA at the time, right? MMA versus Red like had won that tournament like a few months back. People wanted to see that, and so a bunch of interesting matchups had happened in the pools, and then depending on where your pool placement was, you were seeded into the double elim bracket, and it was incredibly important because it put you if you're really good. If you like top the groups, you would get into the winners bracket, but if you didn't, you'd end up like seeded in the lower bracket, so it would be very tough. And this is also the first. I'll go over the groups a little bit. Group A, the three main players you want to look at were Donghagu, Huck, and Naniwa. Huck and Naniwa, this is the first time they actually get to meet against each other, and they have like a mini rivalry through 2011, but basically it's not that special in the sense that Naniwa had a rivalry with everyone because he was such a competitive player, and his personality like offset people, made a bunch of conflicts with a bunch of different players everywhere, basically. And this is an interesting matchup in the sense that basically I think Huck was the better PvP player, and Naniwa, his PvP doesn't really come into effect as a very good PvP player until Rain changes the game. And then it gets worse again after Oracles get buffed in Heart of the Swarm, and it becomes his worst matchup. But before then, he was pretty good at this point. He'd become very good later, and then very shit later after that, after the Oracles come in. Even though he did kind of figure out how to play a little bit, but there was too much variance for Naniwa's taste in PvP. In Group B, obviously there was Boxer and Indra were the two main interests. The show was also in there. He's still a pretty decent player, like I said. Boxer wins out this group. Donggu wins out the first group. I forgot to mention that. And Group C, and then in Group B also like Cruncher somehow makes it out of the open bracket, and in Idra's group, basically his entire claim to fame was annoying Idra. That's about it. In Pool C, you had MMA, and then Rain comes out of the open bracket, and this tournament is probably like Rain's biggest accomplishment, even though he made. Actually, I won't say that. His biggest accomplishment is the GSL finals, but this is like his most famous like run, basically, because this is the run where like people actually thought he was legit. Because in the GSL run he made to the finals, it was off of 2 racks, which is like not interesting. But in this run, it was off of very strong, very very well played TVT, and it was respectable. It was also his last great run, so it's also one I remember the most of all of Rain's games. Even though at the very end of his career he was pretty good before he quit. I'll explain that. Actually, I'll explain it now. Basically, this is Rain's last run, right? And then after that, he goes back to Korea. Then he basically finds a way to get out of TSL, moves to NA, plays around in StarCraft 2 for a while, moves back to Korea for a bit to play in GSTL, and he's actually his skill starts kind of rises, and then he quits entirely, and then moves to America, becomes an MMA fighter, kind of like Jinro. I still think he's in America right now, doing whatever it is. He actually has like a series of blogs you can read on Team Liquid. Just look it up. It's they're all pretty interesting. All have that Korean sense of humor, like that little cheekiness of, I had to escape like a prison break, or of him explaining like what he did afterwards. Pretty interesting. So Rain versus in Pool C, there's like Rain, MMA, and surprisingly it's Rain who wins out this group 5-0. Like I said, very great TVT at this tournament. And then in Pool D, MVP wins out, and then Gonzi from the open bracket comes through and gets second. And other interesting matchups like Huck and Show play off. Huck defeats him. Gonzi is able to make it to like the top. Gonzi is able to beat Huck when they meet. Idra and Naniwa play. Naniwa beats Idra, but then Naniwa himself gets limited by MMA. In the winners bracket, like I said, the 4 top finishers were Donggu, MVP, Boxer, and Rain. Donggu and MVP play. MVP, too solid, too good, just beats down Donggu and moves on. Boxer versus Rain is the very famous winners bracket side matchup, because Boxer was a player that everybody wanted to see win that GSL seed, and everybody kind of knew, whether they wanted to say it out loud or not, that he probably would not win against a Protoss player. Against a Zerg player, it was a little bit better because of the Blue Flame Hellion builds, but TVT was his best matchup. And obviously Rain had shown he was very good at TVT himself, beating MMA. And so they have this epic battle of TVT where Boxer and Rain go at it, and it ends in like battle cruisers and nukes and all this crazy shit, and the Boxer wins out. Boxer moves to the winners finals against MVP, and everybody was thinking, oh, maybe Boxer can do it. No, he can't. MVP too good. MVP too solid. MVP's too strong. Boxer goes to the losers finals, but he just needs one more win, and he'd get into the GSL seed for sure. And then in the losers finals, you have Gonzi come, like I said, he beats Huck, and he gets revenge for his father, so to speak, in Rain, defeats Rain. And then the other side, you have MMA and Donggu, that epic rivalry, epic battle. Another 6 set, but the Blue Flame Hellion meta and MMA's natural skills have MMA come out on top against Donggu. MMA versus Gonzi, the duel of the suns. Like I said, this tournament was about Slayers in a sense, because obviously 3 of the top 4 players were from Slayers, but also because those were the players everybody was interested in. MMA defeats Gonzi, and then all of a sudden it's a battle between father and son, Boxer and MMA. And basically they fight it out, and MMA wins. And MMA wins. And then MVP and MMA meet in the finals. Another clash, like the last time they had met, I believe, was in the GSTL finals, where they had played the ace match where MMA won. But this time MVP takes it. MVP's too strong, too solid, and this like like I said, because this MLG was defined by the Slayers team, it also ill-defined MVP in a sense, or continually ill-defined. Because if you look at the past experiences of MVP as a winner, right? He beats Nesty, that old man that everybody came to love. He beats Donagu, the super hyped Zerg player. He beats Boxer, the legendary Boudoir player. He beats MMA, this shining star that everybody wants to see do well in place of Boxer, as if it was like a lineage thing. He also beat Marine King, and even made him cry. Like, basically, MVP was not loved. Let's put it that way. He was respected, but he was not loved, and the Koreans called him Sleepy because his style was too good. It just put you to sleep. Like everybody else, like betting their soul. It felt like everybody else was betting their souls in the game. MVP was like methodically cleaning them up as if they were trash. It was very very much incredible play, and like I said, it's like a combination of innovation and Tasia. Innovations, mechanics, innovations, refinement, and Tasia's play style, where he kind of lets you fuck up, kind of drains the clock on you, kind of makes you feel the pressure, and then destroys you. Makes it look easy, makes it look boring, but goddamn, it's effective, and that MVP wins that. And then now we go on into GSL August, and GSL August is one of MVP's greatest runs as a player, and it's supremely underrated. But basically, MVP beats almost all of the best players to get to the title. In the group stages, he meets Polt and MC. MC, probably best Protoss player. Polt had just won Super Tournament, super hyped up, loses to MVP. And then you go into the round 16, and it's a single elimination bracket now, like the group stage later. But here's who MVP has to be. He beats Nesty, best Zerg player probably. Maybe an argument for Donghaegu, but like I said, MVP have just beaten Donghaegu. MVP beats Huck, best Protoss foreigner player, arguably a top 3 Protoss overall in the world. MVP beats July Zerg, probably the third best Zerg player at the time. And actually, in this semifinals, July Zerg had played the best macro game of his life, arguably the best macro game Zerg had played up to that point. And what he did was this is like one of the few times where he played to the late game. He built up bases and he built up a giant army to face against MVP. But what MVP did was, like, he was finally forced to reveal one of his hidden hands, apparently, where if a Zerg actually got to the late game, what he did was he'd max out on ghosts and then just use the snipe ability and kill everything you had. And because of the range, because of the damage, Zerg couldn't do anything against that. Like, July Zerg had thrown everything, like Banelings, Mutas, Ultras, Broodlords, and like everything throughout the entire game. Nothing stuck. MVP won, and this was probably July Zerg's best chance to win a GSL. Even though he was in the finals of the other one, there was no chance in hell he was ever going to beat MC, given the way their styles interacted. MVP moves on to the finals where he plays Top. And Top is a forgotten name in StarCraft. And he's kind of underrated in the sense that nobody even remembers him. But basically, I've described him as like this macro-heavy player who had really bad micro. But what really made him shine, obviously, was TVT. TVT was his best matchup. TVT was the only matchup, in fact, where you didn't necessarily need good micro. You needed strong like economic understanding, strong positional understanding, strong economic understanding. If you could get those 3 together, your micro didn't have to be that good. It didn't have to be like Polt fucking microing against siege tanks like he did in the GSL Super Tournament to win that. And so this is a side tangent, but basically this is what makes TVT the best matchup in StarCraft 2. Is like it's the only matchup where you can be rewarded for any play style you decide to play, as long as you are the best at that play style. This changes in Heart of the Swarm, and I think Heart of the Swarm TVT was worse because of it, because it favors a specific type of play style more than the others, and specific types of play. So TVT was probably the best matchup ever made in StarCraft 2. And Wings of Liberty. That's my opinion. Anyway. So Top plays against Zenio. Zenio wasn't that great of a Zerg player. Top plays against Genius. Genius was a player who had stuck in Code S through the use of one super cheesy build, the 3-gate proxy Void Ray. Listen, very good execution, but it was pretty clear Genius was not trying. Actually, Genius even came out at some point and said, I can't believe Choya practices 8 hours a day. I only practice 8 games a day. Ha ha ha. And I'm still in Code S. Ha ha ha. Which is pretty disgusting. But there you go. And Top moves on to play Polt. And in the matchup, this is his hardest player in the round of 16 part. And they play against each other. Top is able to come out. And he's, at this point, one of the best TVT players in the world. And I think Fion, back when he wrote StarCraft 2, basically predicted Top to win this GSL. Actually, Fion amazingly predicted against MVP every single time in the GSL finals. So that's pretty funny. Shout out to him. And so MVP versus Top. This is the final. Finals of this tournament, and it's basically like the last guy MVP hasn't beaten that was a Top player within the span of those 2 months. And this is what MVP does. MVP pulls off the most brilliant tactical move we've ever seen in StarCraft 2, off of a game that was already one of the best games in StarCraft 2. So the game was Daybreak. It was on Daybreak. And basically there's a lot of aggression for both sides, because both sides realize that if you go to a late game Daybreak game, you're kind of going to a weird territory. So what I mean by that is Daybreak is split into 3 lanes, and the middle lane is blocked off by rocks, but they're narrow lanes. And with siege tanks and narrow lanes, that means you can never push into them. So they try to do a bunch of early aggression, try to fuck with the other guy a bit, but it didn't work. So they go into a split map scenario. I have everything on my side, you have everything on your side, and then they both have different decisions on what they want to do. Basically, the late game isn't necessarily pioneered, but there are definitely thoughts created by Byun. And I haven't mentioned Byun at all yet, because he doesn't become prominent until later on. And even then, he disappears almost instantly. But basically, Byun back then, as a TVT player, he was very focused on the end game, and very different from Marine King, where Marine King was all about that base trade style. Byun was more about the very slow creep on you with siege tank line style. He was famous for the 1-inch push, which is basically you siege and unsiege 1 inch at a time until you eventually win the game. That's how Byun played, and because that's how Byun played, he'd sometimes get in these weird situations where he would get in a split map scenario with people, and then at that point, when you get to a split map scenario, you have to drain off damage, you have to trade cost efficiently, and you see this happen with Jinro and Ensnare, which is another game I referenced in the earlier video, where you have Ensnare dropping nukes trying to do damage, but Ensnare obviously didn't do that much. You have, and then in Byun's case, you basically have the 1-inch push, where he's basically trying to cost efficiently trade his units for their units, and that's kind of the only way people could come up with to play this game. And so both Top and MVP come up with a different idea. If I can't push through the narrow lanes on land, you have to go to the air. And so they both start building up and maxing up air army, which is mass Vikings and Ravens. And then the idea is, if you're somehow able to get the air advantage, you have the advantage in the siege tank wars, because the siege tank range is slightly farther than the siege tank vision. So if you correctly siege right, you will always outrange the other tank unless they use the scan, and scans are limited. And on top of that, if they don't have turrets supporting the tanks or marines, you can just get a cloak banshee, and then they're super fucked because tanks can't hit air. So that's what they both went for. And after MVP makes sure everything is sort of finalized on the lanes, and we're certain nothing can break out, we're in here for the long haul, that's when he starts building up for the best tactical move I've seen in the entire history of StarCraft 2. So it spanned 9 years total. This is the single best tactical move anybody has ever done in StarCraft 2. This is what he does. He builds 4 nuke academies. He gets 4 nukes, He gets 4 ghosts. He gets 4 medevacs. He gets his gigantic Viking army. He gets his gigantic Raven. He gets his Raven army, which is like 7 or 8 of them. And then he also gets 3 Thors, or 3 or 4 Thors. And this is what he does, is basically, because everybody's fortified, the mains are all fortified with a bunch of turrets. And so, and back then, medevacs didn't have the super speed of the later expansions. So you can't just fly through the turrets, because then you'll die. So what MVP does that nobody kind of realizes in their head is he uses the point defense drone to absorb the shots of the turret with his Ravens. And then with that, he's able to bring his gigantic Viking armada, his Thors and his Ghosts. And he lands the Vikings, he lands the Thors, and he lands the Ghosts. And he starts destroying everything. And at this moment, Top knows he's fucked. Because Top realizes, if I leave the front lines with my tanks to clear the main, the front lines are roast, and then MVP will gain way too much land, way too much control, way too much damage on the front lines on the economic expansions. But if I don't go, I lose my infrastructure, and that's instant death. Because like I said, it's a game about trading resources efficiently, but you can't use your resources if you don't have anything to build with. No production, no units. And so MVP puts on this like deal with the devil. Which one do you want to protect? Top decides, I'm going to protect my infrastructure, which is the correct theoretical move. And then that's when MVP drops the four nukes, all across the production, but also covering the ramp. So Top can't even go up to his main base and protect his production. And basically, like, his MVP lifts up his Viking army, drives it away, takes his Thors with him, and Top is kind of like stuck in nowhere's land, and MVP takes the middle and basically breaks open the entire game and wins the game. And this is such a brilliant tactical move that I actually think it broke Top's mind. Like, in the sense that Top kind of realizes he cannot play MVP in the late game because MVP is on a literal another level compared to him. And then MVP wins this one 4-1. And so that kind of ends the GSL August, and this is by far the best GSL run MVP has ever done. If we're just talking about pure dominance, like innovation style, get the fuck out of my way, I'm way too good for you kind of style, right? This is the GSL. This is like the best GSL run MVP's ever done, and he basically, between MLG Anaheim and GSL August, he has killed all of the best players. There's nobody left to challenge him. Like, he has literally beaten players 10 through number 2 in every single race, basically. And so, hail to the king. It's at this moment where MVP is for certain given the title of best player in the world, because he's gotten 2 GSLs. He's won the GSL World Championship, which is, like I said, was not an easy run because he beat all the best players there too. And he won MLG Anaheim against all those guys. So, yeah, this is this span of 2 tournaments basically culminates the storylines of all the Slayers guys, and then MVP killing everybody and putting himself as the reigning king of StarCraft 2. So that's it for this part. I hope you enjoyed the series so far. I will say definitely watch at least the highlights of MVP fucking over Top, because that is still in my mind one of the most brilliant tactical moves anybody has ever done. Oh, I guess I'll end it on this note, because honestly this is the last time Top is relevant for the rest of StarCraft 2. Top was a meh TVZ player, a meh TVP player, a good macro player, a shit micro player, but a very good TVT player. And so obviously this run and the GSL Super Tournament run kind of exemplify those traits. And because he never changed, he basically falls off. Because if you can't fix your micro, you can't fix your micro to a certain degree. Like, you don't have to be that great at it. You just have to be good enough. It's not like, for instance, it's not like Zest is like the best Protoss micro player in the world, even when he was the best. No, he wasn't. He was like the 6th. He wasn't even the 6th best. He was like maybe top 10 at best. But Top was like even worse. Top was like top 30 top 40 at best. Like his micro was atrocious, but that was that was him as a player. I will say he does have this brilliant build in GSL Super Tournament against Nestea, and this is like the game where Nestea like makes a comeback of against like 100 supply down, and this should also explain why Top was such a shit player when it came to micro. But basically, what Top does is he uses this a variation of 1-1-1, but instead of getting Marines, he just gets the Hellions and Banshees on one base, and then he slowly expands and puts incredible pressure on the Zerg and puts them way behind, and then wins in the macro game with like overwhelming amounts of units. And that's kind of how he beats Nestea, despite the fact that Nestea was overall a better player. And this build, this Hellion Banshee build, is another part that becomes critical in the age of Broodlord Infestor when MVP gets his hands on it. So I guess I'll end it with this foreshadowing. Top had built the Hellion Banshee build on one base. The Slayers had built the Blue Flame Hellion builds to try to take over Anaheim. Both builds get changed, morphed, and modified by MVP when he in 2012 to create one of the best runs in StarCraft 2 history. All right, I'll see you guys next time.